What have you learned since like COVID that has changed the way you view the world and the way you lead?
Good question. A lot of transformation, I think, for a lot of people since COVID, for people, for businesses, for industries, around the world. But for me, as like you, as a founder, as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, COVID obviously rocked our world a little bit.
To transform a business, you got to transform yourself. You're living with more intentionality and integrity. In my book, Staring on the Wolf, I talk about 3 foundational commitments.
Yeah.
Courage, trust, and respect. How do you develop trust in your organization?
Being in a position that we are to work with all these organizations on this exact thing is building higher trust organizations, becoming more efficient, driving operational excellence. It all comes down to sound people practices and building high trust organizations.
What did you learn when you wrote this book? What did you learn about yourself?
There's stories and examples of people or organizations or cultures back from 7,000 BC all the way to modern times.
Welcome to the Mark Divine Show. The show is more than a podcast. We're a tribe of bold leaders committed to growing with courage, resilience, and heart. So if you're here to lead with purpose and unlock your full potential, then you've found your team. So hoo-yah, let's dive in. Super stoked to have my friend Brent Gleeson here today. Brent, good to see you, brother.
Good to see you, brother.
Yeah.
It's been too long.
It has been too long. Brent's former Navy SEAL, retired or former?
Former.
How do we say that?
Yeah.
There is a distinction there, minor. Former Navy SEAL turned bestselling author, leadership coach, entrepreneur, speaker, all around awesome dude. His books Embrace the Suck, The Navy SEAL Way to an Extraordinary Life, and what was the first one?
First one was Taking Point. 10 fail-safe principles for leading through change.
Yeah, we did a podcast on that.
We did, yeah.
That was the last time I saw you,
Yeah.
I think. He's taken the lessons forged in combat, resilience, discipline, and purpose, translated them into actionable strategies for high-performance teams, for elite athletes, and all leaders who want to thrive under pressure. I'd like to dive deep today into what it means to embrace the suck, to be all in, build mental toughness, and lead with accountability where the stakes are the highest. We're going to talk about your new book coming out December 2nd, All In, Pathway to Personal Growth and Professional Excellence. Hoo-yah.
All right.
All right, man. So you're looking good.
Thank you. That's the 4 kids keeping me young.
I noticed a little gray in their stubble.
Yeah, that's blonde. It's
That's
bleached
blonde?
by the California sun, my friend.
Okay, let's go with that.
Yeah, let's go with that.
Let's go with that. So new baby, COVID baby, you said?
Yeah. The kids are 19, 11, 9, and 4. So I'll be coaching flag football for like the rest of my life.
Oh, man. So let's cover some new territory. Like, what have you learned? You're a father, you're an entrepreneur. Everyone wants to talk about the sexy SEAL stuff. We can do a little bit of that. But what have you learned since like COVID that has changed the way you view the world and the way you lead?
Good question. A lot of transformation, I think, for a lot of people since COVID, for people, for businesses, for industries, around the world. But for me, as like you, as a founder, as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, COVID obviously rocked our world a little bit. Running a management consulting firm where a lot of our work, at the time was done side by side, in person, on
Crushed
site
us,
with
by the way.
clients.
All the training stuff in person,
Yeah, it just went away overnight, which at the end of the day, like a lot of organizations did, not to overuse this term, but we did out of necessity, a radical and immediate pivot into doing that work virtually, which was very uncomfortable for us. It was uncomfortable for clients. Everybody was, as you recall, well, let's wait and see when this passes. And months went by, and a couple of years went by. So, as a founder, and I've been through this before with, I started literally a real estate technology company a year before the housing market imploded.
you remember that? Yeah.
my first entrepreneurial endeavor. We were like, this is going to be amazing. $100 million exit after $100 million exit. And we're like, nope.
No, not this time.
As the saying goes, you have a plan and God laughs. So really, leaning back into what we know about adaptability and resilience and focusing on your wellness and your mindset and how you approach every single day as a leader of yourself first was something that I had the time to lean back into. And
right. Like back to the basics.
Yeah, back to the basics. Clearly back to the basics. And one thing I struggled with initially was just, white knuckling things that I could not control. Like a lot of us, and which obviously is the complete opposite of what a resilient mindset and a growth mindset is all about. So I had to literally spend some time in reflection and meditation and altering my routines and daily activities to make sure I was prioritizing the right things that I could control, as opposed to, hoping and wishing for other things to change that I really just could not impact, at the time. So we got through it and learned a lot, but at the same time, it was a good reset, I think, for a lot of us to focus on the things that matter the most.
Right. Discerning what those are can be a challenge, though, right? Yeah. So what shifted in terms of like your daily practices? And let me, this two ways. Because oftentimes when you're off track or the goalpost shifts, you have to like do some one-off things to like get back on track, to reset, get off the X. But then for it to be sustainable, you have to turn that into a practice.
Right.
So how did you get off the X, and then what new practices or refinement of practices have allowed you to stay focused, stay focused?
I didn't initially get off the X. I was very much in the X
for a long time. That's a comfortable place to be,
obsessing
right?
about being in the X, on the X, everywhere around the X. It was both comfortable and extremely uncomfortable at the same time, and not in a good way, not in the way that sounds cool, but one in that sense, just spending time trying to, unfortunately, frantically find new strategies for keeping the business going and driving revenue and making payroll and things like that. So it took a couple years until about 2022 when things got going again. I think what we saw, though, in a lot of industries, ours included, especially with the general profile of our ideal clients around the world, was, yay, we're out of COVID. Let's get back to spending money and get business back on track. So I think economically 2022 was a bit of a anomaly, because then we saw, at least in our industry, we saw a little bit of a dip again in 2023 where things started to correct again and organizations started tightening budgets back. And so that actually, and I wasn't, to be totally honest, I wasn't really doing what I needed to be doing as far as my mental health, wellness practices, self-medicating too much, things like that, until finally 2023 was just a horrific year, It's just horrific.
Dude, I could actually second that.
It was enough to the point where I was like, in my prayer and reflection time, I was like, WTF. I say that with respect, good Lord, but what the heck is going on here? And because it was just one hit after another, to the culmination of, and I remember this vividly, and I talk about it in the prologue of the new book, All In. I was out with our VP of programs. We were kicking off a new program with one of our big time clients, a big construction company in Dallas, where I grew up, as you know. And I got a text from my mom, and she was like, "Hey," and I didn't even tell my parents I was coming in town because I'm there a lot. We have a lot of clients in Dallas, and it's going to be in and out. And she said, "Hey, your dad took a fall. He's in the hospital." And
you're close to him.
Yeah, very very close. Marine, happy birthday, Marines, by the way. A guy who he liked three things. His priorities were family, work, and working out. That's what he liked to do. Yeah, I know. I was like, I don't know where I got this. I've tried to deviate as much as I can, but it seems to fit. And he had some pre-existing heart stuff, but he was on medication for it. It wasn't slowing him down too much, but he overexerted himself, took a fall, hit his head, and because of the blood thinners that he was on, he had an inoperable brain bleed. So by the grace of God, I just happened to be in Dallas. Seriously, like I was in Dallas the day he fell and got to spend his last 15 hours by his side. And that was, going back to your question, that actually was the catalyst for, and people in our previous line of work were not, immune to loss and death and things like that. But when somebody close within your circle, a parent, a child, sibling, things like that's a big hit. And it makes us really consider our own mortality and how, time is our most precious commodity, yet we spend it freely every day without ever knowing the balance in our account. And so that was a transformative moment for me where, upon reflection, I did three things. One, I immediately decided to remove alcohol from my life forever. So come December, ironically, the day the book comes out on December 2nd, this was not planned, will be the 2-year mark of complete sobriety. Been an absolute game changer in my life. I don't preach it to anybody, but for me, it's elevated my marriage, being fully present with my children, and 10x'd my focus on leading the business. And so, but more, even
It's
more
because of
importantly,
more
just
energy, or what's the?
everything: mental clarity, focus, more energy, a better daily routine, where just without having the cloud, I wasn't a drunk in a ditch by any means, but at the same time, removing that obstacle. I was looking at my life saying, what are the barriers? Thinking like a stop, start, continue methodology.
Sure,
I was
right.
like, what do I need to stop doing? What's getting in my way? And there were other things too, but that was a big one. And I had other guys from the NSW community and entrepreneurs and stuff who've had a lot of success, who also decided for just all different types of reasons to test out this whole sobriety thing. And a couple guys on our team at Accelerate who've done it 30 years in the SEAL teams and haven't touched a drop in a long time. I was like, I think the term was sober curious. So. And just like you and I would do, I just decided to stop immediately. All in,
all in or all
no
out.
programs,
Yeah,
no nothing, just done. And that was almost 2 years ago. And so that was something that then I also crafted an intentional system, like reorganized my life, decluttered my life, narrowed my focus down to a few key relationships, a few key business, strategic priorities, a few key wellness practices. So that my daily early morning routine, for example, not to sound almost cliche, but I'm a big proponent of that, as I know you are, especially with your focus on wellness and mindfulness.
You knew I
and
was going
things
to
like
ask
that.
you
Yeah,
about that.
and so that became part of, I revamped my early morning routine and removing alcohol from my life, and it's really helped me refocus in all those key areas, like I said, in marriage and parenting and work and fitness. So it's
So what were you said there were a couple other key things that changed.
just no specific categories, just, some relationships, friendships and things like that, toxic and needed to go.
Sure.
Really drilling down on my focus on better communication with my wife and being more fully present with my children. Like when I'm there, I'm fully there. I'm not answering emails or on my phone or things like that. And then with work, just really identifying a better strategy, not trying to do too many things, as you know, the good idea fairy can visit us frequently, and we have to keep her at bay. But really narrowing that focus as well, which was also the catalyst, like we were talking about before we went live here, of a full business transformation. So a lot of change came from that very unfortunate.
To transform
incident.
a business, you got to transform yourself,
And you got to do that first.
and you got to do that first,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
And ongoing.
of course. Yeah, that's interesting. So, living with more intentionality and integrity. The crossover, right, is very obvious to me for building a great team in a business setting. In my book, Staring on the Wolf, I talk about 3 foundational commitments: courage, trust, and respect. That every team needs to have like that in order to then get to the get things done stage and moving into excellence. So how do you develop trust in your organization? Like, do you have practices to ensure that trust is like constantly reinforced as opposed to bled off?
Absolutely.
One-off shit wipes out 1,000 attaboys,
Yeah. That stuff gets a little stale after a while.
This conversation about trust is so important. I mean, it's the foundation of Lencioni's dysfunctions, right? Yeah. Absence of trust corrodes every team. So you have to have an active practice of developing trust and reinforcing it. So how do you do that?
It's top of mind because at Accelerate, we're a fully integrated hybrid of management consulting, heavy on culture, people practices, growth strategies, but now we've integrated, part of that business transformation was integrating B2B enterprise software, so rent out and raise capital and are tech enabling everything that we do as well. But being in a position that we are to work with all these organizations on this exact thing is building higher trust organizations, becoming more efficient and driving operational excellence. It all comes down to sound people practices and building high trust organizations. And as you know, all the research and the data, decades of empirical research come back the same, that high trust organizations, and there's several ways obviously to measure that from engagement and other types of data and analysis and feedback from employees. But high trust organizations, they grow more quickly, they're more efficient, they can do more with less, they're more profitable, and they typically dominate their battlefield, so to speak, against the competition. They have a better customer experience, all the good things that any organization would want to achieve. But the other missing pillar I think that people don't focus on is you cannot have a high trust organization without accountability, extreme ownership, and discipline in those areas. Those two cannot live without the other. But we always preach that accountability and putting systems and rituals and routines in place that drive behavior. One thing that we see leaders get wrong, and I've made this mistake many times in the companies I've built, is we lead with talking about the behaviors that we want, from our team, being values oriented,
but not modeling them. Yeah.
but we don't model it. We don't have systems in place to drive that behavior. So the things that we really focus on are, it is really so much going back to the basics of, strategic clarity, role clarity, prioritization, putting in place really good feedback loops, from top to bottom, developing leaders, pouring resources into development, which sounds self-serving because that's what we do as an organization. But again, look at the data. All the organizations that thrive or thrive during a recession or come out stronger when obstacles hit, they're the ones, just like in Naval Special Warfare, arguably one of the highest performing organizations in the world. What percentage of time do we spend in development? Probably 90%?
Significant.
Yeah,
Exactly.
90%,
Right.
which obviously puts us at the top when it comes to our competitive advantage, as we'll say. So it's nothing that's revolutionary or super innovative. It's just being disciplined in putting those things in place and focusing time and energy on these trust building systems and activities, but also training, team members on that. So we follow the same practices internally. We don't even really do one-on-ones because we have constant feedback loops, constant communication. We have systems for performance management, just like any other organization, but it's constant communication practices that keep everybody completely aligned. We built software that helps us do that, which is why we built it. So there's systems of record for everything that we do. And so there's no ambiguity, but
describe what that looks like to me.
Well, even down to like the boring nature of meeting etiquette and how we communicate and ensuring accountabilities, after every team interaction or collaboration session or strategic planning motion, we put everything into software and people come prepared to meetings because we put notes in ahead of time. And the software is designed to change the way people interact in organizations. So driving behavioral change through the technology. To get people to, they put notes in, for example, ahead of time. Let's say you have a board meeting or a QBR coming up, next month, and people are preparing and building decks and all these things, and everybody comes with 60-page deck that nobody's looked at or talked about, and you waste 3 hours just presenting to one another. And that turns out to be a $100,000 waste of time if you look at everybody's billable hours versus their salaries and things like that. So there are things that we can do now, not just our organization, but that all of us have access to, from AI to technology, when used properly, to use technology to be more efficient, but also engage in better trust building activities, which drives efficiency, it drives growth, it retains talent, all those things.
How much do you think trust and accountability are based upon transparency? Because you're describing to me a very transparent, almost opaque system where everybody's got visibility on what everyone else is kind of doing, their thought processes, their outcomes.
Yep.
So you can't hide. That's kind of interesting to me.
I would say, though, that I would caution, leaders, founders, managers, teams about the notion of transparency. It's like, we got to be more transparent. If you collect data from organizations, we've done this for years now, which has influenced what we've built in the software. And there's several things that always rise to the top if you're doing like a company-wide employee engagement survey. And this is regardless of industry, regardless of the size of the organization. A need for greater transparency always rises to the top, or things employees complain about. More autonomy, more delegation, more strategic clarity, all these things. They're always the same. It always comes back the same. So much so that a lot of organizations dismiss that feedback. However, transparency and sharing of information is the right people, the right time, with the right strategic purpose and intent. Because if we're just opening the coffers and sharing everything, one, it's just confusing. And people don't, and then people start looking at the wrong things at the wrong time and actually making worse decisions. So it's just like, any leader, whether you're leading a SEAL troop or, a startup or a enterprise organizations, it's the right information with the right people at the right time, that type of transparency. But also when it comes to performance management and the other things that we know to be true in high-performing teams, where it's real-time feedback in the moment, so you can build a culture of psychological safety and openness where you're not waiting for some clunky, preconceived one-on-one performance chat.
Right.
Next quarter, let's talk about real-time continuous improvement practices.
Do you guys do virtual work still? Or are you back in the office?
Yeah, no, our organization.
Yeah, your organization. Do you work?
We do both. I mean, our teams before COVID, our team was dispersed. We got folks on East Coast and Houston, Texas, here in San Diego, San Francisco.
I mean, how have you built culture, ensured the culture wasn't degraded by the remote work?
I think we had a good foundation before that. We did have offices, and we have offices again now. But I'm usually the only person in the office because everyone's all over the place.
Yeah,
a couple people
client work or traveling. Yeah, okay.
But yeah, a lot of our work is on site with clients, or the team is deployed to client sites or locations, like that. We do virtual work with our clients too, and I think everybody's so used to that now. It's not uncomfortable, so you can maintain a very cohesive, tight knit culture of high performance and discipline within an organization with a remote team. For a long time, a lot of leaders we got to get back to the office, and they ran into a bunch of roadblocks because people don't want to come back to the office, and the new folks coming into the workforce don't want to go to an office. They won't. So you'll be looking hard for the people that actually want to be in an office. I'm old school. I like having people around, but we've adapted. So
let's talk about all in.
All right.
So, why? Where'd it come from?
My wife, she tells me what to do, and then I do it. And, I'm the one who has to execute. But
we need another book.
Yeah,
she's like, get out of my hair. I want you to go away and write for a while. Starting to bug me now you're not drinking.
Yeah, I know.
Getting all this energy.
She actually said that I just for some, I don't usually do this kind of thing, but for some social accountability, I did a quick post saying, announcing that I was eliminating alcohol from my life. Actually, she reminded me that I did that before I had mentioned this to her, my number one partner in life. And then she was like, wait a minute, we're never going to have a glass of wine together again? I'm like, nope. It's only till I'm dead, honey. And so, I'm like you. I'm like all in. I make a choice. If it's assuming it's a good one, I will not deviate from that for anything. And so the book came about. I had some ideas, and truthfully talking to Nicole about different things, and some other things that we were thinking about doing with the business, and just I'm like you. I have ideas floating around, and you write one book, you're like, oh man, I could have. That sparks a new idea, and you want to develop that idea. And I like the creative process, like you do, of writing. I think it's good for the soul. I think it's good for the mind. It's good for your business strategy.
It's cathartic.
Everything.
Sure.
It's so cathartic. Mm-hmm. And so, like you, I think I'll always work on books, whether they're published or not. I think it's just such a great, like you said, cathartic and wonderful creative process that opens up ideas and concepts.
I do my best thinking when I write, believe it or not.
Absolutely.
I come up with some shit when I wrote The Way of the Seal. I'm like, whoa, where'd that come from?
Yeah.
It's almost like you're channeling if you really get in the flow.
Absolutely.
Actually, probably.
And you can turn ideas into models and frameworks that can be applied to your own life or others' lives. And, I believe in, teaching and giving back and putting things out into the world that hopefully will make it a little bit better place.
Yeah. So this is a book about personal excellence.
It's a book about, and it's not a sequel to Embrace the Suck by any means. This is very much a book about, like the subtitle says, about personal growth and professional excellence. As you know, these principles and methodologies apply to our personal lives and professional lives often equally. But it builds off a model that I shared this model in Embrace the Suck more on a personal sense, but also a model that we created at my company at Accelerate on transformation, the Remarkable Results Pyramid. But think, for the viewers, for the listeners here, if I was joking, if James Clear, Robin Sharma, and Mark Manson, and you maybe had a baby, that's weird. I know. Let's we can edit that out.
Reset.
It would be this book because it's very much about routines, habit formation, prioritization, all the things. Because people from whether it's NSW community or anywhere else thinking, we got to be all in all the time, that kind of thing. Well, as we know, we can't be all in on everything. We have to be all in on a few things that really align with our values, align with our identity, or the identity we're continuing to try to evolve so we have a greater impact. And so the book really is focused on the remarkable results pyramid, which is about going from, and it applies to an individual, it applies to a team, it could apply to an entire organization. So looking at going from your current state to your desired future state, whatever time-bound nature an individual or team wants to apply to that. And in the pyramid, there's 5 layers. So at the top, just like anytime you're doing any type of reflection in your personal life or professional business strategy, what are the results we're achieving to date? So you know where you stand personally, where you stand against the competition, where you stand in the marketplace. You know, what have I achieved in my marriage, as a parent, in my entrepreneurial career, or in my professional life? Whatever quantitative and qualitative metrics you want to apply to know where I stand right now, thus far in my life, or in this time-bound
Right.
Arena that I'm measuring right now. And then below that is looking at systems and processes, because systems are really what drive outcomes. If you think about championship sports teams and Olympians, and even in naval special warfare, it's the systems, it's the routines, it's the practices, the processes, the methodologies. That's what drives the outcome. Not just talking about accountability and not trying to be gritty and resilient. It's systems that drive behavioral change. It drives identity. It drives outcomes for teams. And so in that reflective moment or moments, you want to look at what are the systems and processes that I or we have utilized to get the current outcomes we've achieved, whatever results we're talking about, and analyzing those. And what we always caution leaders, teams, or even individuals is it's not always about adding something new or adding something more, but making sure that you've been actually utilizing the systems you have in place, or the resources or tools, to their fullest potential and for their intended purposes. Especially with organizations we work with, employees are always saying, well, we need better tools, better software, we need this, we need that, more people. Not necessarily. You need to be more efficient. You need to be more disciplined. You need to be more accountable. You need to be a better leader. And so it's not always about more, but optimizing what you currently have. And then the 3 layers below that are really more the cultural and mindset dynamics of an individual or a team. And the 3rd layer is about commitment. So if I'm asking myself, kind of like we talked about earlier, when my dad passed and I was deep in grief and reflection, was what has my current level of commitment been thus far to my marriage, as a parent, as a father of 4 children, as a founder and CEO? Have I been fully committed on the right things and at the right time? Prioritizing things that align with my values. And if you really think about the notion of extreme ownership and personal accountability, the answer to that question should always be no. There's always a way, to level up and to make small incremental improvements to our approach to life and work. And below that, then, of course, and you'll appreciate this because a lot of, the influence of things I've studied have come from things that you've written about, and it really goes into mindset. Which people talk about mindset a lot, but what does that really mean? How do you cultivate a mindset? How do you nurture it? How do you feed it the right things that are either in line with your values and your identity, or the identity? The book talks about a lot about identity transformation, but intentional identity transformation, not a departure from your values, assuming those values don't suck. Right. Like I talked about in the last book, assuming they're good values, right. And aligned with making the world a better place to some degree. Doesn't have to be that dramatic, but intentionally aligning your learning practices and the people you surround yourself with and your daily routines and activities. That is what forms someone's identity, for better or worse. And so going through a cleansing process there upon reflection, if need be, on who I spend my time with, what types of content and media am I digesting, what am I putting in my body from a health standpoint, like food and drink, and if you're a person of faith, how much time am I spending on that truthfully? And then the bottom layer is your routines, your daily rituals. What did those look like? And do they need to be revamped to achieve better and better outcomes? So those are the layers of the pyramid. But if we want to achieve continual better and better outcomes and remarkable results as the model dictates, then you actually, after analysis, you go back really to looking at what those foundational routines are, which is why it's the bottom of the pyramid.
That sounds like you used your own model to transform yourself.
I did. And
that's pretty cool, because I'm going through it and I'm thinking, you've already described pretty much the entire model to me in the story about your transformation in
Well,
2020.
This book was very different in the sense that it came from a different place. It was fueled a little bit by grief and loss.
Yeah.
But also, if you think about the principles of a growth mindset, what can we learn from this, and how do we grow, and how do we become stronger and put, positivity out into the world? And so I'm a big Hemingway fan. He's one of my favorite authors, and he always wrote about how it's like to write about life. You need to really live it, especially in this age of big air quotes around the term influencers, but influencers on Instagram and social media who've never actually really done anything, but they're telling you how you should live your life.
Right.
Caution my children about this.
Magnify that.
Yeah, and now we got AI, and there got AI agents out there telling us how to live our lives, and so I wanted to use this process. As you know, this is a 2-year process. Putting a book like this out to test the model and see what works and what doesn't, and how I can use this model in my own life to transform my relationships, my business, my approach to marriage and parenting, and see if this stuff works. And it's been transformative for me and for the company and for my personal life. So.
It's interesting is like see how like the daily rituals, that's the foundation. Everything kind of flows from there, because that's what gives you the clarity, right? And the certainty and the ability to navigate the day, which is the only day you have, right? This is one of my favorite things. You only have today. Tomorrow's a hope. Yesterday is a memory.
Yeah.
So all the work comes today, and that's rituals, mindset, processes. The results you get from that, right, are going to be determined based upon how well you do, but also where you're pointing yourself. So my question is, like, when it comes to remarkable results, we're always working toward an ideal, right? And the ideal is some place that's not where we are, but that's better. And there's 2 challenges to that. One is a lot of people don't know how to envision that, right? Literally to grab hold of an image of what does that look like? Like, what's that expected outcome I want in 3 to 5 years? Because a lot of that depends upon who you become or who you need to be to achieve that outcome. And most people just focus on the doing and not the being part.
Yeah.
Right. And so in that regard, part of your ritual has to be about being and as well as becoming. So this is where work with visualization is really important. So I wanted to ask you about that in terms of your own rituals. So how do you ideate, or how do you visualize? What does that look like in terms of practice? The other problem is, and this is kind of a 2-part question, I've certainly fallen for this, but I don't anymore, is that when you're driving toward an ideal, you never reach it. And so you're measuring yourself against something you're never reaching. And so you're always in a state of persistent, maybe discomfort because you're not achieving what you think you should be achieving.
Right.
As opposed to looking backward and seeing how far you've actually come and what you have actually achieved. That's a practice in and of itself. So
it takes years and years, and I don't think you ever achieve it, like you said.
No, because it's not our nature, right, to celebrate our successes, but to drive, especially guys, to drive toward some ideal. It's kind of a 2-part question, but how do you navigate those 2 situations?
It's interesting. I fully believe in the principle, the methodology that you just described. That, and I always preach to the team, or we preach to each other. They're preaching to me, but that perfection obviously is something we'll never achieve, but excellence is the constant pursuit of perfection. And one thing that's also interesting, where we can kind of deviate and get a little bit off track, is making sure that we're constantly maintaining situational awareness, where mental clarity and wellness practices come into play, and having good daily rituals that get you ready to step onto the battlefield. So you're reading things correctly and looking at the landscape. So if data or experiences dictate some sort of deviation or new path, it's not a failure. It's a course correction. And so because if we keep doing the same things and hoping for that big desired outcome that we want, whatever type of outcome we're talking about, you're guaranteeing disappointment.
That's right.
Because you're going to do the same things and you're not going to achieve that result if you're not continually putting things in place that will drive continuous improvement, and collecting feedback from trusted friends and advisors, and all the things that, to your point, make you intentionally and forever uncomfortable. But
By the way, you should always be uncomfortable,
always,
right? Because that means you're able to ride the edge. Right?
it means you're growing.
Right.
And
We used to say you get comfortable with discomfort, because discomfort's, that's where you're going to grow. That's the edge. Right.
And going back to the first part of the question, I actually write in one of the chapters about this notion of manifestation, and people get that wrong all the time. And we've heard the global influence out there, even down to like the Oprah Winfrey's of the world, saying, I'm just really good at manifestation. And so people, I think, take that incorrectly. They're like, oh, if I just hope and think about, that Ferrari that I've been wanting this whole time, or, that $1 billion outcome for my company that I'm working so hard at. Obviously, there's a few missing pieces there. It's not just about sitting, crisscross applesauce and chanting, hymns until the $1 billion falls into your lap or a Ferrari pulls up outside. It's really more about, to your point, vision and visualizing the outcomes. And obviously not just the opinion of you and I sitting here and others, but plenty of behavioral psychology and research shows that if we, obviously with realistic notions and, with a good strategic approach, if we're envisioning the outcome of something, whether it's the sale of a business or improving a relationship or whatever it is, and you can really truly visualize it. What does it look like? What does it feel like? What does, if you're thinking about, what, your company or my company looks like 5 years from now, what are the behaviors of the people? What does the culture feel like? What would competitors have to admit that this organization does exceptionally well? Like going to that level of a granularity in your visualization, not just the rosy outcomes, but the obstacles that you're going to face and the blockages that that will inevitably crop up, and the contingencies that will have to be applied. That's visualization. And then our minds automatically start working backwards. It's not a one and done thing. Obviously, this is for most who do this well, it's a daily practice. Because like you said, we only have today. And so thinking on a daily basis with that in mind, your mind will start to prioritize different things and think in a different way. And so that's why, having some sort of exit strategy for a business or for a project is always good, even if you never intend on exiting that thing. Because you think differently, you plan differently, you build differently.
Right.
And so that's...
Which gives you more options.
It gives you more options, but you make different types of decisions, right, as opposed to like, let's just focus on growth, or let's just focusing on having a great relationship, or I'm just going to be a better parent. We always preach that, unless goals are specific and time bound, I'm not talking about cliche SMART goals, but then it's not a goal. And you have to be specific, actionable, and measurable in every aspect of your life, or you probably will fall short of meeting those intended outcomes.
Staying on visualization for a second. So obviously you have your personal practice. Your company is inextricably linked to your life goals and whatnot. But what I found is, and when I try to teach, when I coach leaders, is that this is also a team practice.
Yeah.
Right? Just like, the way we did in the SEALs was actually very visual and thematic and emotional briefs. Yeah. You know what I mean? Showing videos, talking it through. You see a lot of guys are like closing their eyes and they're going through in the head. Everyone's got a common vision of what victory looks like. Yeah. And of course, mentalizing the obstacles and all the contingency plans is a big part of that. But I don't find many corporate teams do that. Right? Because they're uncomfortable still with the woo-woo-ness. Like, I teach people to sit around and box breathe before a meeting because it has miraculous ability to just synchronize everybody, clear the mind like an Etch-a-Sketch, and you come into the meeting with a whole different level of awareness. Yeah. Once they experience that, like there's no going back. Yeah. But sitting around and visualizing is something different. But you can do something like we did in the SEAL teams where CEO and teammates present with pictures and videos and stories. And it's like this relentless communication till everyone begins to gel around this common vision. So how do you do that in your team?
I think it comes down to, you always want to consider, and this is sometimes an afterthought, among leaders, is we do have to consider the human condition and the what's in it for me aspect of leading a team towards a common goal. And everybody, and in the highest functioning teams and organizations, you will build a culture, and it's never perfect, that where people will put the team's needs before their own. We see it obviously every day in the SEAL teams. It's a little tougher to translate that in the corporate world because in most industries, lives aren't technically on the line, but in some there are. And at the same time, we still need to consider the individual's intrinsic and extrinsic motivating factors. MIT did an incredible study. This was a long time ago, but it's still, we're talking about the human condition, so the data is still pretty much the same when it talks about these three motivational factors of an individual or a team, and it comes down to autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And considering down at the very core and essence of who individuals are, and that's one of the many burdens of command of you as a leader, of me as a leader, of leaders in organizations we work with, is being able to lead, manage and engage people differently based on their different motivating factors. And that same study said, pay people enough so you get money off the table. All right, put that off to the side. Now we're talking about things that fall into those three buckets of autonomy. That's another thing when you collect research across all organizations, from, at least in my experience, the last 5 years, the need for more autonomy is always there. And organizations get it wrong, and it's a little inauthentic, or shit just comes off the rails because they apply autonomy without resources and people don't know what to do. But then also being purpose-driven, which again is also
that's directly tied to vision.
It's directly tied to vision. It's tied to culture, but that has to be actively managed every day by every manager at every level of the organization and your culture carriers and everyone else to ensure that those practices are a living, breathing part of the team's existence, which is not easy.
Turning communication of the vision and purpose into a process.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
And that's the biggest challenge, I think, where a lot of organizations fall short. They're like, well, we have our mission, we have our vision, and it's on the
wall.
It's on the wall in the boardroom, and you ask layer down, and nobody knows what the hell you're talking about, much less the core values, even the executive
team. This is the
team.
holy grail.
Yeah, it should be the holy grail.
Every touch point, somehow those are being conveyed.
Every decision, every action, how I show up every single day should be guided by those core principles, the mission, and the vision, which is typically or should be a little more aspirational. But operationalizing that into systems is where organizations fall short every time, because it's a lack of skill, ability, or time, or typically just gets either way. It doesn't matter. It gets deprioritized over sales activation or other growth initiatives. Whereas the leaders that get it know that doing that will drive faster growth. It'll hit the bottom line in a more impactful way and create a much more profitable and efficient organization because everybody's singing off the same sheet. They're moving in the same direction, and have common goals as opposed to the typical siloed nature of most organizations doing the things they know they're getting comped for, but not really truly putting the mission above everything else. And that goes into good cultural practices that are not deprioritized, and teams and leaders are trained on these things. And so most of these practices don't require any budget.
That's right.
Or strategic planning is just little practices that people and teams need to do on a daily basis.
Give me some examples of what has worked for you and your clients.
One really good, tangible thing that anybody can visualize, something obviously we can draw from our experience in the military and apply it in good, high-performing teams, whether it's sports or business or the like, is one example would be how you approach continuous improvement activities like debriefing. It's one big thing we preach and teach, and we actually built an entire software product around after-action reviews, because it's not just a system like we've been talking about. That system drives, when done correctly, it drives an environment of psychological safety and transparency, which elevates employee engagement, intent to stay, and retention. It drives immediate, again, when done correctly, immediate implementation of things that need to be fixed, small incremental improvements on systems or efficiencies, and that usually elevates in a business organization to better products, better services, better customer experience, more rapid growth, better profitability. And so that's one good example that obviously we can both visualize, but anybody can.
In that debrief process, you're always linked to the purpose, vision, and
always
outcomes have to be aligned with that.
100%.
A lot of times when things fail, you can look right there and say, okay, this was off target.
Every time. When something fails and you boil it down to, it's not about placing blame, but let's look at how we failed. And it will always be some degree of deviation from values, deviation from mission, deviation from the priorities that support the mission and values every single time.
That's amazing.
Without fail, if you really look at it.
Right.
And so, but on the flip side of that coin, that makes it a lot easier to avoid those missteps when leaders and teams are more values driven.
Right.
They're mission driven. It's top of mind. And when
and that's one way to
Yeah.
enculturate it, right? Because
Yeah.
if debrief after debrief, you see that there's misalignment with purpose, vision, values, damn, you better get that right up front
Yeah.
then.
And these are your decision-making mechanisms.
Right.
If it deviates outside of that, you don't do it. You don't waste time or resources on it, period. And when organizations get that right, they can't lose. They'll have obviously obstacles and, and adversity like every other organization, or going back to like your individual growth and development. I know I'll speak for myself, anytime I've deviated, once defined, anytime I've deviated outside of stated values or, my own personal mission, nothing, usually at minimum, nothing good happens. That's for sure. But usually like bad shit happens. I get in trouble with my wife, or my kids are pissed at me.
Nothing good happens usually equals bad happens.
Yeah,
right?
usually also bad shit happens, and somehow it always has some sort of hard cost associated with it. I found too. Costs you money for some reason. Right? Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. It's so true.
Yeah.
What did you learn when you wrote this book? What did you learn about yourself, and like what new came out of?
I took a different approach with this book, and like my previous books, it's not some seal memoir that has very little to do with this book at all. There's some foundational things in there, but it's the research I did, which was again just like you, the research is the most fascinating part of looking at. There's stories and examples of people or organizations or cultures back from 7,000 BC all the way to modern times. And when it comes to how people and teams have achieved whatever your definition of greatness or success looks like, and what their all-in methodology was, and it's always the same. It goes back to the same, well, obviously with some variations, but it goes back to being values-driven. It goes back to being relentlessly focused on a few key priorities, not getting distracted by shiny objects or the good idea fairy, but staying almost to the point of being a little unbalanced, which is something I touch on in the book. And you hear some people talk about how you got to be unbalanced to achieve success. Well, you will guarantee yourself a wake of destruction in your personal life if you go that far, which some people unfortunately are fine with. However, you can do both, but if you really want this book is about, hence the subtitle around personal and professional, is what is the unique marriage between those. And in this day and age, there's no work-life balance. It's just work-life integration. And how do I do that? Where are my priorities fall? And so all the research and all the studying, and then applying every single principle in that book to my personal life. One, to make sure that it's fully authentic and is true, but also like, hey, I want to benefit from this stuff, too. Selfishly, I mean, come on, what's in it for me? And so that's been transformative in the fact that once you sometimes make those tough decisions to eliminate activities, habits, and even people from your life that are not either adding value or pulling you back. And I'm not talking about abandoning people who need you. I'm talking about people who are toxic and activities that are a waste of time and things that will really damage the identity that you want to continue to always evolve. Once you make those tough decisions, like only good things happen, and you won't move away from things in your life that have caused you grief or trauma or things like that. Those things have to continue to be worked on. Mm-hmm. But also the responsibility of working on those things. I think going back to accountability is something that I touch on in the book as well.
You've done a lot of work on yourself. It's been really fun to track your progress and to, call you a friend, but we don't see each other very often. And one of the outcomes of relentless personal development is a really positive and optimistic mindset. So having said that, when you look at what's going on in our culture, politics, all the confusion, what do you see with that positive, optimistic mindset of yours? How do you navigate that and talk to your kids about it and about the future?
Having a positive, optimistic mindset, full transparency is something I struggle with every day. It's part of my morning routine is to reflect and meditate and consider, and spend time in prayer and thinking about how am I going to show up today, going back to my values and my top priorities, There are only a few. And so, but daily reflection is what drives that. If you get away from that, then you find yourself
at the vagaries of the marketplace.
And so it's something, because you might, as soon as that wonderful meditative 60-minute morning routine for me, that's what I do. I kind of break it into 3 20-minute chunks of wellness activity, some reading or learning, and then 20 minutes of prayer and reflection. Once that's over, I mean, you could be hit with some amazing news, or you could hit with some crap you really don't feel like dealing with. And so, but it puts you in a mindset of, all right, focus on what's in my control, work the problem. If it's something that's a challenge or a setback or an obstacle, what can I learn from this, and just keep moving forward. Not an easy thing to do. I struggle with that a lot. But when you look out into the world and one thing I always reflect on is we always say, oh, these crazy times we're living in. Haven't they always been crazy? I mean, like, we always say that.
It's just being blared at us a little bit louder.
Yeah, I think there's just more visibility. It's blared at us across all different types of technology platforms. There's just more accessibility to the chaos. I don't think it's all that worse. I think it's just different, depending upon what's going on. And I think we just have more access to it. And that's another thing I've struggled with is you see some people go as far as saying, well, I don't watch the news, or I don't, think about what's going on in the world. And I think to a degree, that's a little selfish sometimes, because how are you going to have an impact? Or if you're going to stay in your own little bubble, I mean, I guess that's to each their own, but
there's a difference between like binge watching network news and scanning the headlines and like cherry picking things you need to know.
Yeah. Maintaining awareness. But it, avoiding, too deep of a political aspect. Right. I go back to leaning on my principles and my faith. So when I have an opinion about something, I have an opinion, but I don't try not to shove it down people's throats. But as it relates to what's in control in my world, or where I can have an impact outside of that small little world, then that's what I let dictate my perceptions on things going on, without trying to make assumptions, which a lot of us do. We take what's delivered to us in the media, and then we make immediate assumptions about that as truth, and that's not always the case, obviously.
Rarely is.
Rarely is, yeah. So.
Yeah. Fascinating. All in. So December 2nd.
December 2nd, yeah.
December 2nd.
It's been a
pathway to personal growth and professional excellence, Brent. It's awesome. Appreciate you being here, brother.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I've been looking
great
forward
to
this.
see you. Yeah, no doubt.
You too. Like I said before, you look younger every time I see you. It's those wellness practices, and no more snowmobiling for you. We won't get into that, but
dude, that was my wake up call. Holy cow! Hitting a tree at 40 miles an hour has a way to kind of smack some sense into you if you survive it.
Near death experiences have a tendency to do that.
I got to tell you this. I mean, I have said this before in podcasts, but I'll say it again. But when I hit the tree and then I was laying in the snowbank, I opened my eyes. I had to just take a moment to check whether I was on Earth or somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because I really didn't think I was going to open those eyes. But I looked up and I saw this beautiful sky and all the snow kind of filtering through the trees. And I just had this like wave of gratitude.
I made it. Yay. Oh, no, I'm still here on Earth.
And then I was like,
damn it.
Whoa, excuse me. Almost broke the chair. Yeah, I'm still here. That's awesome. Hilarious. Then I had to check to see if I had all my limbs and things were working. I was like, still going here.
Wasn't your time, my friend.
It was not my time, which I'm grateful. I wasn't ready to leave. More work to do.
Yeah. Amen. Amen to that.
Who you are, brother. Awesome. All right. Thanks for tuning in to the Mark Divine Show. I appreciate you walking this path of leadership and impact. I got to get my glasses, man. I can barely read my own writing here.
I got your back.
Thanks, man. And I thank my friend Brent Gleeson for being here. Appreciate it, brother. Yeah, you're awesome, man. You're inspiring me. And thank you for sharing this podcast with your friends and colleagues. Please pass it along if you enjoy it and you find value in it. And also very helpful if you can rate and review wherever you listen. To learn more about me, visit markdivine.com or unbeatableminded.com. Discover how you can work with me directly in our personal leadership development and transformation programs. Follow me on Instagram at markdivineofficial or join me on my LinkedIn conversations. Till next time, be all in. Hoo-yah, Divine out.